There is someone you have tried to forget. Maybe you deleted the messages. Maybe you stopped looking at their photos. Maybe you told yourself the story was over. Maybe you convinced everyone around you that you had moved on. But somewhere inside you, they are still there. Not always loudly, not every second, but quietly, in the background, like a shadow that follows you when the world becomes silent. You may be living your life, working, smiling, answering messages, doing what needs to be done. But then, without warning, something brings them back. A song, a place, a sentence, a scent, a dream, a moment of loneliness. And suddenly, it feels as if time has not passed at all. Their presence returns. Their absence returns. The questions return. Why do I still think about them? Why do they still have this power over me? Why can't I forget someone who may not even be part of my life anymore? Carl Jung would not treat this as simple nostalgia. He would not reduce it to weakness, romance, or obsession. Jung would look deeper. He would ask, what part of your unconscious is still tied to this person? Because sometimes, the person you cannot forget is not only someone you loved. Sometimes there's someone who revealed something hidden in you. Something you did not want to see. Something you did not know was there. Something your conscious mind had buried. Something your soul was not ready to face until they appeared. And this is why they stay. Not because they're necessarily meant to return. Not because they're the only one. Not because your life cannot continue without them. But because your psyche has attached meaning to them. They became more than a person. They became a mirror, a symbol, a wound, a doorway, a carrier of your shadow. And until you understand what they're showing you, part of you may continue to return to them. Not because you want to suffer, but because the unconscious repeats what has not yet been integrated. This is the uncomfortable truth. The person you cannot forget may be showing you your shadow. Not the shadow in a dramatic or evil sense, but the Jungian shadow, the hidden part of you, the rejected part, the wounded part, the needy part, the angry part, the longing part, the part of you that still wants to be chosen, the part of you that still fears being abandoned, the part of you that still confuses love with pain. And perhaps this person did not create that shadow. Perhaps they only revealed it. They touched something that was already inside you. They awakened a wound that had been sleeping. They brought a hidden pattern into the light. And now your soul is asking you to look, not only at them, but at yourself. Because the deepest question is not, why can't I forget this person? The deeper question is, what part of me is still living through them? Before we go deeper, subscribe to the kingdom within if these reflections speak to something you have been silently carrying. This channel is for those who are ready to understand the hidden patterns, shadows, and inner forces that shape who we become. There are people who enter your life and feel strangely familiar. You may not understand why. You may not know them for long. You may not have a logical explanation, but something about them touches you. They seem to awaken a part of you that had been asleep. Around them, you may feel more alive, more emotional, more vulnerable, more intense, more hopeful, more afraid. And this is where many people make a mistake. They believe the intensity means the person is destined for them. They believe the emotional charge means love. They believe the inability to forget means the connection must be sacred. But Jung would ask us to slow down, because intensity is not always love. Sometimes intensity is recognition, but not always recognition of the soul. Sometimes it is recognition of a wound. Sometimes the people who feel most unforgettable are not the ones who bring us peace. They are the ones who activate the parts of ourselves we have not yet healed. This is why someone can hurt you and still feel difficult to release. This is why someone can be unavailable and still feel magnetic. This is why someone can give you confusion, distance, silence, or mixed signals, and yet your mind keeps returning to them. Not because pain is love, but because the unconscious often confuses familiar pain with connection. If you grew up earning love, someone who makes you prove yourself may feel familiar. If you grew up feeling unseen, someone who gives attention and then withdraws may feel powerful. If you carry a fear of abandonment, someone inconsistent may activate your deepest hunger. If you secretly believe you are not enough, someone's rejection may become a battlefield where you try to win your worth back. And suddenly, you're not just dealing with a person. You are dealing with an old emotional pattern. You're trying to solve the past through the present. You're trying to make someone choose you so that every old rejection finally loses its power. You're trying to make someone stay so that every old abandonment is repaired. You're trying to make someone see you so that the unseen part of you can finally rest. But the shadow does not heal by being chosen by another person. The shadow heals when it is seen, accepted, understood, and integrated by you. That is why this connection may feel so difficult. Because part of you does not only miss them. Part of you believes they hold the key to something inside you. Your worth, your desirability, your closure, your identity, your peace, your proof that what you felt was real. But the more power you give them, the more you lose contact with yourself. You begin to organize your inner life around their presence or absence. If they message, you feel alive. If they are silent, you feel abandoned. If they look at you, you feel chosen. If they ignore you, you feel erased. If they return, you feel hopeful. If they leave again, you collapse. This is not freedom. This is possession by an unconscious complex. A complex, in Jungian psychology, is an emotionally charged pattern in the unconscious. It can take over your thoughts. It can distort your perception. It can make you react from old wounds instead of present reality. When this complex is activated, you may stop seeing the person clearly. You see them through the wound, through longing, through fantasy, through fear, through the old story that says, if they choose me, I am valuable. If they leave, I am nothing. If they miss me, I mattered. If they forget me, I disappear. And this is where the person becomes a mirror of your shadow. They show you the beliefs you still carry unconsciously. They show you how much of your worth is still dependent on external validation. They show you how quickly you abandon yourself when someone emotionally important becomes distant. They show you the places where you still confuse uncertainty with passion. They show you how deeply you crave the love of someone who does not consistently meet you. They show you how much of your energy can be captured by fantasy. And this is not a reason to shame yourself. It is a reason to awaken. Because the shadow is not your enemy. The shadow is the part of you that was exiled because it was too painful, too vulnerable, too unacceptable, or too dangerous to feel. Maybe you learned not to need too much, so your need went into the shadow. Maybe you learned not to be angry, so your anger went into the shadow. Maybe you learned not to desire openly, so your desire went into the shadow. Maybe you learned not to admit loneliness, so your loneliness went into the shadow. Then someone appears and touches all of it, and suddenly the shadow rises. You feel needy, jealous, desperate, hopeful, angry, confused, powerless, attached. You may not recognize yourself. You may wonder, why am I like this? Why do I care so much? Why can't I let go? Why does their silence affect me so deeply? Why do I still want someone who made me feel unstable? These questions are not signs that you are broken. They're signs that something unconscious has become active. The person is not only a memory. They are an activation. They activated the hidden parts of you that want to be known. And this is where many people get lost. They keep studying the other person, what they meant, what they felt, why they changed, why they left, why they stayed silent, whether they miss you, whether they will return. But Jung would say, turn inward, because the person may have opened the door, but what you're looking for is inside the room. Ask yourself, what did this person make me feel about myself? Did they make me feel chosen? Did they make me feel invisible? Did they make me feel powerful? Did they make me feel small? Did they make me feel alive? Did they make me feel abandoned? Did they make me feel like I had to earn love? Did they make me feel like I was waiting for permission to be enough? These answers matter because they reveal the shadow material behind the attachment. If their silence made you feel worthless, the issue is not only their silence. It is the part of you that still believes silence means you have no value. If their distance made you desperate, the issue is not only their distance. It is the wound in you that interprets distance as abandonment. If their attention made you feel alive, the issue is not only their attention. It is the part of your own life that has not yet been fully awakened from within. If their rejection destroyed you, the issue is not only their rejection. It is the old story in you that says rejection proves you are not enough. This is shadow work. Not blaming yourself, not blaming them, but seeing clearly. Because when you do not see the shadow, you call it fate. You say, I cannot forget them because they are my destiny. But sometimes the truth is, I cannot forget them because they touched a wound I have not healed. You say, this connection is too powerful to ignore. But sometimes the truth is, this connection is powerful because it carries my projection. You say, I need them to come back. But sometimes the truth is, I need to reclaim the part of myself I abandoned when they left. This is not less meaningful. It is more meaningful because now the experience is not only about losing someone. It is about finding yourself. The person you cannot forget may be the one who brings you face to face with your own hidden life. Your unlived passion, your fear of being alone, your hunger for love, your wounded pride, your need for validation, your abandoned tenderness, your suppressed anger, your fantasy of being rescued, your deep desire to be seen without having to perform. And once these parts appear, you cannot simply push them back into darkness. That is why forgetting does not work. You can distract yourself. You can block them. You can remove reminders. You can stay busy. But if the shadow has been activated, the psyche will keep asking for integration. Because the goal is not to forget the person. The goal is to understand what they revealed. Forgetting says, erase the memory. Integration says, learn from the memory. Forgetting says, pretend it did not matter. Integration says, it mattered because it showed me something true. Forgetting says, run from the pain. Integration says, listen to the pain without becoming it. And this is the path back to yourself. You do not have to hate the person to heal. You do not have to deny the connection. You do not have to pretend you never cared. You only have to stop making them the owner of what they awakened. Because what they awakened belongs to you. The love you felt belongs to you. The depth you touched belongs to you. The longing that rose belongs to you. The wound that opened belongs to you. The shadow that appeared belongs to you. And the power to integrate, it also belongs to you. The person may have been a mirror, but you're the one who must face what the mirror reveals. That is where transformation begins. The person you cannot forget often becomes powerful because they did not only touch your heart, they touched your unconscious. And when someone touches your unconscious, the connection can feel much bigger than ordinary attraction. It can feel magnetic. It can feel spiritual. It can feel impossible to explain. You may tell yourself, there was something different about them. I felt something I never felt before. They awakened something in me. I do not know why, but I cannot let them go. And perhaps all of that is true. But Jung would ask a deeper question. What exactly did they awaken? Because not everything that awakens inside us is love. Sometimes what awakens is longing. Sometimes fear. Sometimes desire. Sometimes the need to be chosen. Sometimes the wound of rejection. Sometimes the fantasy that another person can rescue us from ourselves. Sometimes a person becomes unforgettable because they carry our projection. Projection happens when something inside us, something unconscious, rejected, undeveloped, or unclaimed, is placed onto another person. We do not see them only as they are. We see them through the hidden material of our own psyche. We see our hopes in them, our wounds, our fantasies, our unlived life, our hunger, our missing self. And this is why they can appear larger than life. They may be just a human being, but to the unconscious, they become a symbol of love, a symbol of freedom, a symbol of safety, a symbol of beauty, a symbol of everything we believe we are missing. This is why forgetting them feels so hard. You're not only trying to release a person, you're trying to release the meaning your psyche attached to them. And meaning is powerful. A person can leave your life, but a symbol can remain alive inside you for years. You may forget details about their face. You may forget their exact words, but you do not forget what they represented. You do not forget the feeling of possibility. You do not forget the part of yourself that came alive. You do not forget the fantasy of what could have been. This is why some attachments are not only emotional, they are symbolic. And symbolic attachments cannot be healed only by time. They must be understood, because the psyche does not release a symbol until the message inside it has been brought into consciousness. So ask yourself, what did this person represent to me? Did they represent being wanted? Did they represent being finally seen? Did they represent freedom from loneliness? Did they represent the life I wish I had? Did they represent the version of myself I wanted to become? Did they represent proof that I am lovable? Did they represent the end of an old wound? This question matters because your suffering may not be only about losing them. It may be about losing access to what they symbolized. If they represented being chosen, their absence may feel like rejection. If they represented safety, their silence may feel like danger. If they represented passion, their distance may make life feel empty. If they represented your worth, their indifference may feel like proof that you are nothing. But this is the illusion of projection. The person appears to hold something that actually belongs to your own soul. They appear to carry your beauty, your aliveness, your value, your peace, your future, your emotional oxygen. And because you believe they hold it, you feel powerless without them. This is how projection becomes emotional captivity. You stop living from your center. You begin living around their image. Their memory becomes a place you visit when you feel empty. Their silence becomes a message about your worth. Their absence becomes a wound you keep touching. Their possible return becomes the future you secretly wait for. And the more you wait, the more your own life becomes paused. This is one of the quiet dangers of an unconscious attachment. It does not always destroy your life dramatically. Sometimes it simply steals your presence. You are here, but not fully here. You are living, but part of you is still waiting. You are moving forward, but part of you keeps looking behind. You are building your life, but part of your energy is still attached to a person who may not even be aware of what they represent to you. This is why Jungian healing is not about forcing yourself to forget. It is about withdrawing the projection. To withdraw a projection does not mean saying the person meant nothing. It does not mean denying the connection. It does not mean becoming cold. It means recognizing that what you saw in them also belongs to you. The depth you saw in them may be your own depth. The beauty you saw in them may be your own capacity to perceive beauty. The passion you felt around them may be your own life force awakening. The love you wanted from them may reveal the love you have not learned to give yourself. The peace you wanted through them may be the peace your nervous system is asking you to create within. The power you gave them may be your own power waiting to be reclaimed. This is difficult because the ego wants a person. The ego wants the return. The ego wants the message. The ego wants the apology. The ego wants to know that it mattered. But the soul wants something deeper. The soul wants integration. The soul wants you to take back the parts of yourself you placed outside yourself. The soul wants you to stop kneeling before the image of another person and begin descending into your own truth. And this is painful, because withdrawing a projection often feels like losing love. But you are not losing love. You are losing illusion. You are losing the fantasy that another person must carry your missing self. You are losing the belief that your worth depends on their recognition. You are losing the dream that if they return, everything inside you will finally be whole. And when an illusion begins to die, grief appears. You may grieve the person, but you may also grieve the dream of what could have happened, the dream of who they could have become, the dream of who you could have been with them, the dream that their love would finally prove something about you. This grief is real. Do not dismiss it. Do not shame yourself for it, but also do not let it become your prison, because grieving a fantasy is part of becoming conscious. It is the moment when the psyche says, I am ready to see reality. And reality is not always cruel. Sometimes reality is the first mercy. Reality says, they may have mattered, but they are not your source. They may have awakened you, but they are not the owner of your awakening. They may have touched your heart, but they are not the keeper of your soul. They may have shown you your shadow, but they are not responsible for integrating it. This is where maturity begins. Because an unconscious person says, I cannot be whole unless they choose me. But a conscious person begins to say, they revealed where I am not yet whole, and now I must return to myself. This is the difference between attachment and transformation. Attachment says, come back and save me from this pain. Transformation says, this pain is showing me where I abandoned myself. Attachment says, you are the answer. Transformation says, you are the mirror. Attachment says, I need you to complete me. Transformation says, I need to integrate what you awakened. And this is the hard truth. The person you cannot forget may not be the one who completes you. They may be the one who exposes where you still seek completion outside yourself. They may not be your final home. They may be the doorway to your hidden inner world. They may not be the love story your ego wanted. They may be the initiation your soul needed. That does not make the experience meaningless. It makes it sacred in a different way. Not sacred because you must chase them. Sacred because they revealed something true. There's a reason some people remain in your mind long after they leave your life. It is not always because they loved you deeply. It is not always because they were meant for you. It is not always because the relationship was rare, sacred, or unfinished. Sometimes they remain because they touched the wound that was already waiting inside you. And the wound wants an ending. It wants repair. It wants proof. It wants the moment to finally change. It wants the person who made you feel unwanted to suddenly want you. It wants the person who stayed silent to finally speak. It wants the person who left to come back and say, I see you now. You mattered. I should have chosen you. And if this happens in your imagination, it can feel like healing. But it is not healing. It is fantasy giving temporary relief to a wound that still needs real attention. This is why the mind creates scenes. You imagine the conversation. You imagine the apology. You imagine them realizing your worth. You imagine them returning with a different heart. You imagine being finally chosen by the very person who made you feel rejected. But Jung would say that imagination is never random. It reveals the symbolic need of the psyche. When you keep imagining them coming back, ask yourself, what would their return prove to me? Would it prove that I am lovable? Would it prove that I was not easy to forget? Would it prove that what I felt was real? Would it prove that I was not foolish? Would it prove that I am valuable? Would it prove that I was finally enough? Because if their return has become proof of your worth, then the wound is deeper than the person. The wound is not simply, I miss them. The wound may be, I do not feel chosen unless they choose me. The wound may be, I do not feel valuable unless the person who rejected me regrets it. The wound may be, I do not feel real unless someone else confirms what I felt. The wound may be, I do not know how to validate my own experience. This is where many people become trapped. They think they need closure from the other person. But often, what they truly need is closure from the belief that their worth depends on someone else's recognition. Closure from another person can be beautiful. It can bring peace. But it cannot become the condition for your freedom. Because if you need another person to explain your pain before you are allowed to heal, then your soul remains trapped in their silence. And their silence becomes a prison. This is why some people suffer for years over a conversation that never happened. They are not only waiting for words. They are waiting for permission to move on. They are waiting for the other person to make the pain meaningful. They are waiting for someone who may not have the depth, maturity, awareness, or courage to give them what they need. And Jung would turn the question inward. Can you give meaning to your pain without their participation? Can you understand what happened inside you even if they never explain what happened inside them? Can you reclaim your worth even if they never confess they saw it? Can you leave the psychological waiting room? Because sometimes the person you cannot forget remains powerful because you are still waiting for them to complete your inner story. But what if the story is not meant to be completed by them? What if it is meant to be completed by you? This does not mean pretending they did not matter. It means recognizing that healing cannot depend on someone else becoming conscious. Your awakening cannot be postponed until another person understands their role in your pain. Your life cannot remain suspended because someone else never gave you the words you deserved. At some point, the soul asks, will you continue to wait at the door of someone who may never open? Or will you finally enter your own life? This is not easy because the wound often believes that letting go means losing. It believes that if you stop waiting, the connection meant nothing. It believes that if you stop hoping, you are betraying what you felt. It believes that if you move forward, you are accepting that they got away with hurting you. But healing is not agreement. Healing is not approval. Healing is not saying what happened was okay. Healing is saying, I will not let this wound become the center of my identity. I will not keep my soul attached to the place where I was not fully met. I will not turn someone else's inability to love me into the measure of my value. This is the turning point. Because as long as the wound is unconscious, it keeps searching for repair in the same place it was activated. If someone made you feel unwanted, you may crave their desire. If someone made you feel abandoned, you may crave their return. If someone made you feel invisible, you may crave their attention. If someone made you feel replaceable, you may crave proof that no one replaced you. But the person who activates the wound is not always the one who can heal it. Sometimes they are only the messenger. Sometimes they are only the mirror. Sometimes they are only the surface where the old pain becomes visible. And this is painful because the ego says, you opened this wound, so you must close it. But the soul says, this wound was here before them. Now that it is visible, you must finally care for it. This is the difference between emotional dependence and inner work. Emotional dependence says, I need you to make me feel okay. Inner work says, your presence revealed where I am not yet okay within myself. Emotional dependence says, if you leave, I disappear. Inner work says, your leaving showed me where I had disappeared from my own life. Emotional dependence says, choose me so I can feel worthy. Inner work says, I must stop making another person responsible for my worth. This does not make the process less painful, but it makes it meaningful. And meaning is the beginning of transformation. One of the reasons the person becomes impossible to forget is because they are tied to an emotional wound that keeps repeating. Maybe this is not the first time you have wanted someone unavailable. Maybe this is not the first time silence has felt unbearable. Maybe this is not the first time you've tried to earn love. Maybe this is not the first time you have felt like you were too much for someone. Maybe this is not the first time you have confused anxiety with chemistry. Maybe this is not the first time you have stayed attached to potential instead of reality. And if this pattern has happened before, the current person is not the whole story. They are part of a pattern. They may be the latest face of an older wound. Jung did not see repetition as meaningless. Repetition is the language of the unconscious. What repeats is asking to be seen. What repeats is asking to be integrated. What repeats is asking for consciousness. If the same emotional pattern keeps returning through different people, the unconscious is not trying to punish you. It is trying to wake you up. It is saying, look here, this is where you give your power away. This is where you abandon yourself. This is where you confuse familiar pain with love. This is where you seek salvation outside yourself. This is where the shadow still leads. And if you do not listen, the pattern often becomes louder. The connections become more intense. The heartbreak becomes more painful. The attachment becomes harder to break. Not because life is cruel, but because the unconscious will keep presenting the material until the conscious mind can finally face it. That is why forgetting someone is not enough. You can forget a name and still repeat the pattern. You can move on from one person and find the same wound in another. You can delete the message and still carry the belief. You can block the person and still be possessed by the shadow. This is why real healing asks for more than distance. Distance may protect you, but consciousness transforms you. Distance says, I will not expose myself to this person anymore. Consciousness says, I understand why I was drawn to this pattern in the first place. Distance removes the trigger. Consciousness heals the wound beneath the trigger. Both may be necessary, but only consciousness changes your future. Because until you understand the emotional pattern, your next attraction may simply become another chapter of the same unconscious story. This is why the person you cannot forget should be approached like a dream. In Jungian psychology, dreams reveal unconscious material through symbols. A dream is not always literal. A person in a dream may represent a part of yourself. A house may represent your inner world. A shadow may represent what you have denied. A door may represent transition. A child may represent vulnerability. In the same way, an unforgettable person can function like a dream image. They may represent something in your psyche. They may symbolize a wound, a desire, a fear, a missing part, a hidden strength, a life you have not lived, a boundary you have not built, a truth you have not admitted. So instead of asking only, what do they do to me? Ask, what do they symbolize for me? Were they the person who made you feel seen after years of invisibility? Were they the person who made you feel desired when you secretly felt undesirable? Were they the person who made you feel alive when your life had become emotionally numb? Were they the person who represented escape from loneliness? Were they the person who gave you hope that love could finally be different? Were they the person whose rejection reactivated the oldest belief that you are not enough? When you answer honestly, the person becomes less mysterious. The attachment begins to make sense. And what makes sense can begin to heal. Because suffering becomes heavier when it has no meaning. When you do not understand why you feel so attached, you may shame yourself. You may say, I should be over this. What is wrong with me? Why am I so weak? Why do I still care? But when you see the wound behind the attachment, compassion becomes possible. You realize, I'm not weak. I am wounded. I'm not crazy. I am triggered. I am not powerless. I am unconscious in this area. And now I'm beginning to see. This is not an excuse to remain attached. It is the beginning of responsible healing. Because once you understand the wound, you are called to care for it differently. Not by chasing the person. Not by waiting for their validation. Not by begging for closure. Not by stalking their life. Not by feeding the fantasy. But by becoming present to the part of you that still hurts. There's a moment in the healing process when you begin to realize something that changes everything. Maybe the deepest part of you does not actually want the person back. Maybe the deepest part of you wants the part of yourself that you lost when you became attached to them. This is a difficult truth to accept, because on the surface, it feels like you want them. You want their message, their presence, their explanation, their apology, their return, their recognition, their love. You want the story to change. You want the silence to break. You want the pain to finally make sense. But beneath the surface, something deeper may be happening. You may not only want them. You may want your energy back, your peace back, your confidence back, your dignity back, your ability to focus back, your connection to your own life back, your sense of being whole without needing another person to confirm you. You may want the version of yourself that existed before you started waiting, before you started checking, before you started wondering, before their absence became louder than your own inner voice, before your worth became attached to their behavior, before your life became organized around what they did or did not do. This is the real return, not their return to you, your return to yourself. And this is where the shadow becomes a teacher. Because the shadow does not only show you pain, it shows you where your life force has been trapped. It shows you where your power has been placed outside you. It shows you where your attention has been captured by an image. It shows you where you are still dependent on someone else to feel real, wanted, valuable, or alive. And this is not easy to see, because the ego prefers the external story. The ego says, I cannot heal because they hurt me. I cannot move forward because they never gave me closure. I cannot feel peace because they never explained. I cannot feel worthy because they did not choose me. And yes, the external story may contain real pain. They may have hurt you. They may have confused you. They may have disappeared. They may have given mixed signals. They may have awakened hope and then withdrawn. They may have made promises they could not hold. They may have been emotionally careless with something sacred inside you. But Jung would still ask, what happens inside you now? Because your freedom does not begin when they finally become conscious. Your freedom begins when you become conscious. This is not about excusing them. It is about releasing yourself from the psychological prison of waiting for someone else to change before you can live. Many people remain attached because they believe the person who wounded them must be the one who restores them. But this belief gives too much power away. It says, you broke me, so only you can fix me. But the soul knows a deeper truth. No one can return me to myself if I refuse to come home. This is why the healing process often feels like grief. You are not only grieving the person, you're grieving the illusion that they were the missing piece. You are grieving the fantasy that their love would solve the old ache. You are grieving the version of the story where they suddenly understood everything and chose you without hesitation. You are grieving the dream that if they returned, the shadow would disappear. But the shadow does not disappear when someone returns. Sometimes it becomes stronger, because if the wound is not healed, the same fears return. You fear losing them again. You fear being abandoned again. You fear silence again. You fear the shift in tone. You fear the pause between messages. You fear not being enough. You fear that the person who once activated the wound will activate it again. This is why the return of the person is not the same as the return of peace. A person can come back and still not heal what they revealed. A person can say the right words and still not integrate your shadow. A person can love you and still not remove your fear of being unlovable. The work belongs to you, and this is not a punishment. It is an initiation into selfhood. Jung's path of individuation is the path of becoming whole. And wholeness cannot be given to you by someone else. It cannot be texted to you. It cannot be apologized into you. It cannot be delivered through another person's regret. Wholeness is built when you gather the rejected, wounded, hidden, and exiled parts of yourself and bring them into consciousness. That means you must turn toward the parts of yourself that this person awakened. The part that felt desperate. The part that felt jealous. The part that wanted to be chosen. The part that felt abandoned. The part that became addicted to possibility. The part that accepted confusion because it feared emptiness. The part that ignored its own dignity for a small sign of attention. These parts are not enemies. They are exiled parts of you asking to be understood. If you reject them, they will continue to control you from shadow. If you shame them, they will hide deeper. If you pretend they do not exist, they will return through another person. But if you bring them into awareness, they begin to transform. This is why the person you cannot forget can become a doorway into power. Not because they give you power, but because they show you where you have abandoned it. Ask yourself, where did I stop choosing myself? Where did I silence my own needs to keep the fantasy alive? Where did I ignore the truth because hope felt safer? Where did I confuse being patient with betraying myself? Where did I make their potential more important than their reality? Where did I accept emotional crumbs because I was afraid to lose the entire connection? These questions are painful because they ask for honesty, but they do not exist to condemn you. They exist to return you to agency. Agency means I can see where I participated in my own self-abandonment. Not because you caused their behavior, not because you deserve pain, but because your freedom begins where you recognize your own choices. Maybe you chose to stay mentally attached to someone who was not present. Maybe you chose to interpret silence as mystery instead of information. Maybe you chose to keep hoping because grief felt too final. Maybe you chose to focus on their potential because their reality hurt too much. Maybe you chose to believe the fantasy because the truth would require you to let go. This is human. This is not shameful. Everyone has done this in some form. But healing begins when you stop calling self-abandonment devotion, when you stop calling anxiety intuition, when you stop calling inconsistency depth, when you stop calling longing destiny, when you stop calling your wound a spiritual sign. Because the shadow loves disguise. It hides behind noble words. It says, I'm just loyal, but sometimes it is fear of letting go. It says, I feel them energetically, but sometimes it is emotional dependence. It says, I know they are my person, but sometimes it is the old wound seeking repair. It says, I am waiting because love is patient, but sometimes it is a self-betrayal dressed as faith. This does not mean love is never patient. It means patience without self-respect becomes suffering. Faith without reality becomes illusion. Loyalty without reciprocity becomes captivity. And spirituality without discernment becomes another way to avoid the truth. This is why Jung's work is so powerful for emotional healing. He does not ask us to reject the spiritual. He asks us to become conscious, to understand the symbolic meaning of what we experience, to ask whether the inner image is guiding us toward wholeness or pulling us deeper into a complex. Because not every intense inner experience is a command to act. Sometimes it is a symbol to understand. Sometimes the person appearing in your mind is not a message to contact them. It is a message to contact the part of yourself you lost. Sometimes the dream about them is not proof they are thinking of you. It is your unconscious showing you what they represent. Sometimes the longing is not a sign that you must return to the past. It is a sign that some part of you is still waiting to be integrated. This is where the work becomes more subtle. You stop reacting to every thought. You stop obeying every wave of emotion. You stop treating every memory as destiny. Instead, you begin to ask, what is the psyche showing me? If I dream of them, what part of me are they symbolizing? If I miss them, what feeling am I actually missing? If I feel anger, what boundary was crossed? If I feel jealousy, what insecurity is being exposed? If I feel desperate, what abandonment wound is active? If I feel hope, is it rooted in reality or fantasy? This kind of questioning brings you back into relationship with yourself. And the moment you begin relating to yourself, the other person loses some of their unconscious power. They may still matter, but they're no longer the center of the universe. They may still be missed, but they're no longer the only source of meaning. They may still appear in memory, but memory no longer becomes possession. This is the beginning of inner freedom. And inner freedom often comes quietly, not as a dramatic breakthrough, not as a sudden disappearance of all feeling, but as a small pause, a moment when you feel the urge to check and you do not, a moment when you feel the ache and you breathe, a moment when you remember them, and instead of spiraling, you ask, what is this showing me? A moment when you choose your own peace over the old fantasy. A moment when you stop betraying yourself for the possibility of being chosen. These small moments matter. They're the way the psyche is rewired. They're the way the shadow becomes integrated. Every time you choose awareness over compulsion, something in you becomes stronger. Every time you tell the truth instead of feeding the fantasy, your soul becomes clearer. Every time you return to your own body instead of living inside their absence, your energy comes back. This is what many people do not understand about letting go. Letting go is not one decision. It is 1,000 small returns to yourself. It is not saying once, I release them, and never feeling pain again. It is saying again and again, I will not abandon myself today. I will not turn this memory into a prison today. I will not make their silence the measure of my worth today. I will not worship the image today. I will not feed the wound today. I will choose reality today. This repetition is sacred because the wound was also built through repetition. Repeated silence, repeated rejection, repeated uncertainty, repeated self-doubt, repeated emotional hunger. So healing also requires repetition, repeated presence, repeated self-honesty, repeated boundaries, repeated compassion, repeated return. And slowly, a new inner pattern begins to form. Instead of reaching outward every time you feel pain, you reach inward. Instead of asking, what are they doing? You ask, what am I feeling? Instead of asking, do they miss me? You ask, where am I missing myself? Instead of asking, will they come back? You ask, what part of me still has not returned? These questions turn longing into self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is power, because when you know yourself, you become less available for unconscious repetition. You begin to recognize the old pattern earlier. You notice when someone's distance activates your wound. You notice when your nervous system mistakes unpredictability for chemistry. You notice when you start idealizing potential instead of seeing reality. You notice when you're giving someone your inner gold. You notice when you're trying to be chosen by someone who has not chosen themselves. And because you notice, you can pause. You can choose differently. This is how the shadow becomes wisdom, not by being destroyed, but by being understood. The desperate part becomes a messenger of unmet need. The jealous part becomes a messenger of insecurity that needs compassion. The angry part becomes a messenger of violated boundaries. The longing part becomes a messenger of unlived life. The abandoned part becomes a messenger asking for self-presence. Every shadow part carries energy. And when you stop rejecting that energy, it becomes available to your life again. The energy that once went into waiting can become creativity. The energy that once went into analyzing can become clarity. The energy that once went into chasing can become devotion to your own growth. The energy that once went into fantasy can become vision for your future. The energy that once went into proving your worth can become quiet self-respect. This is the hidden gift of shadow work. The very place where you felt weakest can become the place where your power returns. But only if you are willing to stop making the other person the center of the story. At some point, you must stop asking only why you cannot forget them. You must begin asking what you're meant to do with everything they revealed. Because awareness without integration can become another form of suffering. You may understand that they awakened your shadow. You may understand that you projected something onto them. You may understand that an old wound was activated. You may understand that your longing is connected to something deeper than romance. But if nothing changes in the way you live, think, choose, and return to yourself, the pattern will continue. This is why integration matters. Integration is not simply knowing the truth. Integration is living differently because of the truth. It is the moment when your insight becomes action, when your pain becomes wisdom, when your shadow becomes part of your wholeness instead of controlling you from the dark. So how do you integrate the shadow that this person revealed? You begin by withdrawing your energy from the fantasy, not from love, not from the memory, not from the truth that something meaningful happened, but from the fantasy that keeps you trapped. The fantasy says, if they come back, I will finally be okay. If they regret losing me, I will finally feel valuable. If they explain themselves, I will finally have peace. If they choose me, I will finally be whole. But the soul knows that this is not freedom. This is dependency disguised as hope. Hope can be beautiful when it opens your life, but hope becomes a prison when it keeps your life paused. So the first act of integration is to tell the truth about the fantasy, not to destroy yourself, not to become bitter, but to become free. Ask yourself, what story am I still waiting for? Am I waiting for them to return? Am I waiting for them to apologize? Am I waiting for them to realize my worth? Am I waiting for them to confirm that what I felt was real? Am I waiting for them to become the person I imagined? Am I waiting for their regret to heal my rejection? Am I waiting for their love to prove that I am enough? These questions may hurt, but they're necessary because the part of you that waits must be seen. It must be met with compassion. It must be told, I understand why you waited. I understand why you hoped. I understand why you wanted this story to end differently. But we cannot live in the waiting anymore. We cannot keep building a home inside someone else's absence. We cannot keep making our worth dependent on a person who may never return with the awareness we need. This is not giving up on love. This is giving up on self-abandonment. And there is a difference. Giving up on love makes the heart close. Giving up on self-abandonment allows the heart to become wiser. A closed heart says, I will never feel again. A wiser heart says, I will feel deeply, but I will not lose myself. A closed heart says, no one can be trusted. A wiser heart says, I will learn to trust myself first. A closed heart says, love is dangerous. A wiser heart says, unconscious attachment is dangerous, but love with awareness is sacred. This is the kind of heart Jungian work asks you to develop. Not a heart that is numb, a heart that is conscious. The second act of integration is to separate the person from the projection. This is one of the most important steps, because as long as the person and the projection are fused together, they will seem impossible to release. You will not be dealing with a human being. You will be dealing with an inner image. An image made of memory, fantasy, longing, pain, hope, desire, fear, and unfinished meaning. So bring them back to human size. Ask yourself, who were they in reality? Not only in fantasy, not only in potential, not only in the version you hoped they would become. Who were they in their actions? Were they consistent? Were they emotionally available? Were they honest? Were they capable of meeting you? Were they respectful of your heart? Did they bring peace or confusion? Did they make you feel safe or constantly uncertain? Did they choose you clearly, or did they keep you emotionally suspended? This does not mean reducing them to their flaws. It means seeing the whole person, the beautiful parts and the painful parts, the tenderness and the limitation, the connection and the inconsistency, the meaning and the reality. Because fantasy often edits reality. It remembers the warmth, but forgets the confusion. It remembers the chemistry, but forgets the anxiety. It remembers the rare moments of closeness, but forgets the long periods of uncertainty. It remembers what could have been, but ignores what actually was. Integration requires the whole truth, not the cruel truth, the complete truth. You can say, yes, there was something meaningful. And yes, there was also something painful. Yes, I felt deeply. And yes, I abandoned myself at times. Yes, they awakened something in me. And yes, they could not be the place where my wholeness lives. This is maturity, to hold both. To stop making the person either a saint or a villain. To stop making the connection either destiny or nothing. To allow complexity, because the psyche becomes free when it no longer needs illusion to survive. The third act of integration is to reclaim what you projected. Ask yourself, what did I believe they gave me? Did they make you feel alive? Then ask where your life has become too small. Did they make you feel seen? Then ask where you have stopped seeing yourself. Did they make you feel desired? Then ask where you have rejected your own body, beauty, or presence. Did they make you feel safe? Then ask what kind of inner and outer safety you need to build. Did they make you feel inspired? Then ask what creative part of you is asking to wake up. Did they make you feel chosen? Then ask where you have not chosen yourself. This is the secret. What you're looking for in them may be a doorway to what you must develop in yourself. If you only chase the person, you miss the doorway. If you worship the messenger, you miss the message. If you cling to the symbol, you miss the soul behind the symbol. So reclaim the energy. Say, the aliveness I felt belongs to me. The love I felt belongs to me. The depth I saw belongs to me. The longing reveals something in me. The wound is mine to care for. The shadow is mine to integrate. The power I gave away is mine to bring home. At first, this may feel like words, but repeat them until they become a way of living. Because reclaiming energy is not a single emotional moment. It is a daily practice. Every time you stop checking, you reclaim energy. Every time you stop replaying the fantasy, you reclaim energy. Every time you stop making their silence mean something about your worth, you reclaim energy. Every time you return to your breath instead of running into the story, you reclaim energy. Every time you choose your own life over the image of them, you reclaim energy. This is how you return to yourself. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but repeatedly. The fourth act of integration is to listen to the shadow without obeying it. The shadow does not become integrated because you let it rule your life. It becomes integrated when you bring it into consciousness and respond with wisdom. If the needy part appears, do not shame it. Ask what it needs. If the angry part appears, do not suppress it. Ask what boundary was crossed. If the jealous part appears, do not identify with it. Ask what insecurity is asking for reassurance. If the abandoned part appears, do not let it chase someone who cannot meet you. Ask how you can stay present with yourself. If the fantasy appears, do not attack it. Ask what pain it is trying to protect you from. This is how the adult self begins to lead. You do not say, I should not feel this. You say, I feel this and I can hold it. You do not say, this part of me is pathetic. You say, this part of me is wounded and it needs consciousness. You do not say, I must act on this longing. You say, this longing is information, not a command. That sentence alone can change everything. This longing is information, not a command. This sadness is information, not a command. This memory is information, not a command. This desire is information, not a command. This dream is information, not a command. This emotional wave is information, not a command. When you understand this, you stop being possessed by every inner movement. You become the one who listens, the one who discerns, the one who chooses. And this is the beginning of true inner authority. Because the goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to become conscious enough that emotion does not become your master. The fifth act of integration is to create boundaries with the sources that keep the wound alive. Sometimes the attachment remains not because the connection is still alive, but because you keep feeding it. You check their profile. You reread messages. You look for signs. You listen to songs that reopen the wound. You imagine conversations. You ask people about them. You keep a door open in your mind, even when reality has closed it. Again, do not shame yourself. This is human. When we are hurting, we search for small doses of connection. Even painful connection can feel better than emptiness. But at some point, you must ask, is this helping me heal? Or is it keeping me attached? Is this giving me clarity? Or is it feeding the fantasy? Is this honoring my heart or reopening the wound? A boundary is not punishment. A boundary is a container for healing. You're not saying, they're evil. You are saying, my nervous system needs space. My soul needs silence. My heart needs protection. My energy needs to return. This may mean not checking, not rereading, not asking, not revisiting, not keeping the fantasy alive through small rituals of pain. Because every ritual feeds something. If you have a ritual of checking, you feed obsession. If you have a ritual of replaying, you feed attachment. If you have a ritual of self-blame, you feed shame. So create new rituals. A ritual of breath, a ritual of journaling, a ritual of walking, a ritual of prayer, a ritual of silence, a ritual of returning to your body, a ritual of asking, what is mine to reclaim today? These new rituals begin to teach the psyche that life exists beyond the attachment. At first, your mind may resist. It may say, but what if I miss something? What if they come back? What if this is the last thread? What if letting go means losing forever? This is fear speaking. Meet it gently. Say, if something true is meant for me, I do not need to abandon myself to receive it. If love is real, it will not require me to live in panic. If a connection has meaning, I do not need to keep hurting myself to honor it. If they return with truth, I will meet that moment from my center, not from my wound. And until then, I choose peace. This is strength, quiet strength. The sixth act of integration is to stop using pain as proof. Many people believe that because they suffer deeply, the connection must be destined. Because they cannot forget, it must mean something supernatural. Because the longing is intense, it must be love. Because the grief is heavy, the person must be the one. But pain alone does not prove destiny. Pain proves that something in you has been touched. It may be love. It may be a wound. It may be projection. It may be grief. It may be the death of a fantasy. It may be the awakening of a shadow. So do not ask only, how intense is this? Ask, what is this intensity doing to me? Is it making me more conscious or more dependent? Is it making me more whole or more fragmented? Is it leading me toward love or towards self-abandonment? Is it opening my heart or trapping my nervous system? Is it helping me become more real or keeping me attached to illusion? This is discernment, and discernment is one of the highest forms of self-love. Because self-love is not only comfort. Sometimes self-love is the courage to stop romanticizing what is hurting you. Sometimes self-love is admitting, I wanted this to be love, but it became a mirror of my wound. I wanted this to be destiny, but it became a lesson in self-abandonment. I wanted this person to choose me, but now I must choose myself. This admission can break your heart, but it can also break the spell. The seventh act of integration is to allow grief to do its work. Grief is not failure. Grief is the process by which the soul releases what it can no longer carry. Let yourself grieve the person. Let yourself grieve the timing. Let yourself grieve the dream. Let yourself grieve the version of yourself that waited. Let yourself grieve the words never spoken. Let yourself grieve the ending that never came. Let yourself grieve the possibility. But do not confuse grief with a sign that you should go back. Grief does not always mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes grief means you are finally telling the truth. You are finally admitting, it hurt. I wanted more. I hoped longer than I should have. I love an image. I lost myself trying to be chosen. I am ready to come home. Grief is painful because it removes illusion. But once illusion is removed, something real can grow. A real relationship with yourself. A real respect for your boundaries. A real understanding of your patterns. A real connection to your body. A real capacity for love that does not require you to disappear. This is why grief is sacred. It clears the ground. It makes space for a life that is not organized around waiting. And after grief, slowly, life begins to return. Not all at once, but in small signs. You laugh without forcing it. You wake up and they are not your first thought. You hear a song and survive it. You remember them without losing your breath. You stop needing to know what they are doing. You begin to feel curious about your own future again. These are not small things. These are signs of psychic energy returning to the self. They are signs that the complex is losing power. They are signs that the shadow is no longer ruling from the dark. They are signs that you are becoming whole. The eighth act of integration is to turn the wound into creative life. This is where transformation becomes beautiful. The energy that once went into longing can become art. Writing, prayer, movement, work, healing, service, a new vision, a deeper relationship with your own soul. Because emotional energy does not disappear. It changes form. If you keep directing it toward the person, it remains attachment. If you bring it back into yourself, it becomes life force. This is one of the deepest secrets of individuation. The shadow contains energy. What you repress does not vanish. It waits. And when it is integrated, it becomes power. Your longing can become depth. Your grief can become wisdom. Your anger can become boundaries. Your desire can become creativity. Your vulnerability can become intimacy with yourself. Your wound can become compassion. Your obsession can become self-knowledge. And the person you could not forget becomes part of the path that led you back to your own soul. This does not mean you're grateful for every painful thing. It means you refuse to let pain remain meaningless. You take what happened and ask, how can this make me more conscious? How can this make me more honest? How can this make me more whole? How can this help me stop repeating the same wound? How can this return me to the life I abandoned? These questions transform suffering. They do not erase it. They transform it. And transformation is the language of the soul. So perhaps the person you cannot forget was never only about love. Perhaps they were about awakening. Perhaps they were about shadow. Perhaps they were about the part of you that wanted to be chosen so badly that it forgot it could choose itself. Perhaps they were about the child inside you who still waits for someone unavailable to finally stay. Perhaps they were about the power you gave away. Perhaps they were about the fantasy you built because reality felt too painful. Perhaps they were about the version of yourself that wants to be born now. If that is true, then your task is not to hate them. Your task is not to chase them. Your task is not to erase them. Your task is to understand the meaning of their image inside your psyche and take back what belongs to you. The memory can remain, but the possession can end. The love can remain, but the self-abandonment can end. The lesson can remain, but the waiting can end. The tenderness can remain, but the fantasy can end. And when the fantasy ends, something extraordinary becomes possible. Reality, your real life, your real body, your real needs, your real dreams, your real future, your real capacity to love without disappearing. This is what the shadow wanted all along. Not their return, your return, not their validation, your self-recognition, not their apology, your freedom, not their love as proof, your wholeness as truth. So if you still cannot forget them, do not use that as evidence that you're trapped. Use it as an invitation to ask, what wound is still asking for care? What projection is still asking to be withdrawn? What fantasy is still asking to be grieved? What shadow is still asking to be integrated? What part of myself is still waiting outside the door of someone else's heart? And then, gently, patiently, courageously, bring that part home. Bring home the part that begged to be chosen. Bring home the part that stayed silent to avoid losing them. Bring home the part that accepted confusion. Bring home the part that confused anxiety with love. Bring home the part that made their absence your identity. Bring home the part that forgot your own life. Bring home the part that still believes someone else must confirm your worth. Do not attack these parts. Welcome them. Say, I see you. I understand why you waited. I understand why you were afraid. I understand why you wanted proof. I understand why you love the fantasy. But we're coming home now. We are not living in someone else's shadow anymore. We are not building our identity around absence. We are not making another person the keeper of our soul. This is integration. This is the sacred return. And when you begin to live this way, something begins to change. You may still remember them, but the memory becomes softer. You may still feel sadness, but sadness no longer owns the whole room. You may still wonder, but wondering no longer controls your choices. You may still love, but love no longer means losing yourself. And one day, perhaps quietly, you will realize the person you could not forget was never the final answer. They were the mirror. They showed you your shadow. They showed you your wound. They showed you where you had given your power away. They showed you how deeply you wanted to be chosen. They showed you where you needed to choose yourself. And once you receive the message, the messenger does not need to haunt you anymore. You can bless what was meaningful. You can grieve what was painful. You can release what was fantasy. You can reclaim what was yours. And you can walk forward, not empty, but more whole. Not untouched, but more conscious. Not cold, but wiser. Not closed, but rooted. This is the path of Jungian healing. This is the path of individuation. This is the path from projection to integration, from wound to wisdom, from obsession to consciousness, from waiting to living, from losing yourself in another person to finally returning to the kingdom within. Because the kingdom within is not found in the one you cannot forget. It is found in the part of you that becomes conscious enough to ask, what did this person reveal in me? And brave enough to answer. If this reflection spoke to something you have been carrying in silence, subscribe to the kingdom within. Here, we explore Carl Jung, shadow work, projection, emotional healing, and the hidden patterns that shape who we become. And remember, the person you cannot forget may not be the one you are meant to chase. They may be the mirror showing you the part of yourself you're finally ready to reclaim.